Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today we've got a special episode in store for you. I have my good friend and coworker, Mr. John, the Cowboy Coach Anderson, on the call, on the pod with us here today. Welcome, John. Glad to finally have you on here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Mark. I've waited a long time for this, so this will be a good one.
Yeah, man. So, John, let's go right into it. You get the same first question that everybody does. You don't get special treatment just because you work with me. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
That's a great question, and really, I should probably have a better definition since that's what we talk a lot about, right? Is being intentional. It's part of some of the content and frameworks that we teach, but when I think about being intentional, I think about living on purpose and in alignment with my morals and my values. So there's really a lot to unpack there, I think. But for me, it's not just living like on autopilot and letting the day come to you and hoping that your life just kind of takes form, and that it's going to magically work out. But actually taking like sitting down and reflecting, like what do I want my life to be like? What do I want my reputation to be? How do I want people to view me? And have the intention, right, to actually live it out. Take some time, reflect, what is it that you really want, right? And then actually think about how to, and take action of how to make it happen.
Yeah.
And when I talk about that, I talk about not just like in my career and who I am as a coach, a man, but also like a husband and a father and a leader of my family and the community. So it's not just what do I want to be and what do I want to do for my career, but it's also like, how do I want to show up for my family? How do I want my family to be? How do I want my two girls and my son, how do I want them to see me? And then how do I teach them to be the best people that they can be, growing up?
Mm-hmm. So. Man. All right. First of all, everybody just go back to the beginning, rewind, go back to the beginning of the show, re-listen to that last 2.5 minutes. Listen to that last 2.5 minutes. Let John educate you on what it means to be intentional, because I really think he nailed it. He nailed it.
Nice. So, thank you.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. All right, John, let's talk a little bit about, how we got together, where this all comes from. I mean, when you were, if I remember right, man, when you were, when we first met, it came via introduction from two different people in two very different kind of areas. They both told me I needed to meet you. And you ended up coming to one of our events, one of my very, very early events, the early version of what's now the Thriving Leader, which is a little bit about what we're talking about today. And the relationship evolved over the years. You were at Ralco Nutrition back then, and I sort of recruited you out of there and said, "Hey, man, come be a coach." Come be a coach. And then that turned into being a facilitator. Now you're the senior success coach on the Momentum Company team. And it's been a wild ride over the last, coming on 9 years.
Yeah. It's a pretty incredible journey. And I would have never thought that this is where I would be, so I graduated South Dakota State University, with a animal science and egg business degrees, right? Like thinking I was going to be, I was a formulation specialist, at Ralco Nutrition, formulating swine diets and cattle diets, goat, sheep, shrimp a little bit, like all of the things, and led some teams there. And if you'd have told me back then that this is where I would be, I'd be coaching and facilitating, speaking. I'd like, I'm not going to do that. That's
right.
For somebody else, not me. 'Cause I'm a little bit, shy and timid. So I never thought I would do that, but it was interesting. when I was growing, I guess within Ralco, kind of getting into
Mm-hmm.
some leadership positions, I knew that I had to do something other than just read the books. I was reading all the books. I was listening to a lot of YouTube videos, and so I was like ready to take the next step, go to some like actual conference, and that's when my boss, who you knew
Mm-hmm.
from college days or whatever it is, right? Is like he tells me about you, and then all of a sudden my dad, he just got back from hearing you speak at I think it was the National Grain Convention up in Minnesota. Like he's
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I just
Minnesota
listened
Grain and Feed.
to."
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah.
And he comes back and he's like, "Oh man, you got to meet this guy. He was so good." And then pretty soon, like I don't know, a few days later, within a week, I get this call from you, this Mark Jewell guy. I'm like, who is this? And I heard a little bit about you, and we had a little bit of a conversation. Yeah, and you invited me. I think it was like that had been like early March, late February, uh, that we first talked, and you were having like the millennial mastermind in
Yeah.
in Minneapolis,
Yeah,
right?
yep.
And
Back then, the what's now the Thriving Leaders started out as the Millennial Mastermind, and this is the back in the day when everybody was worried about these big bad millennials entering the workforce, who now by and large are running it.
Mhm.
But we had written that program, and we sold a lot of it and put a lot of it out there, and that's what really was the genesis of what now today is the Momentum Company still running the Thriving Leader program. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny how things. I mean, it takes what 12 years for things to a lot evolves in 12 years. Let's say that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I still get like memories, from my phone of taking pictures or like on Facebook of those events back in the day of me sitting in like the classroom and
Yeah,
doing all the
yeah,
things. I'm like, oh wow, it's so much has changed. I mean, a lot of it is some of it's the same, but a lot of it has changed, and I think it's pretty cool to see how much it's evolved
hmm
over the years, and really like how great it's become. Because like I think you and I every time we just level up, right?
hmm
We talk about it, we discuss about it, and we just say, hey, what could we change? What could be better? What could we tweak a little bit just to get it better and better? And that's been cool to be a part of. Help
yeah.
the evolution of that.
Well,
But
think about it this way:
yeah.
anytime you do something over 140 times, and it takes 2 days to do it every time, so double the number, right? So we're
Yes.
pushing on a year's worth of being in the classroom over the last probably 9 or 10 years, and it takes time for that stuff to add up. But when you think about it, that's literally almost a year of teaching Thriving Leader nonstop.
Mm,
If you put it all on the calendar back to back to back every day, it would be a whole year of just being in the classroom doing that thing every day. But obviously we have time in between times to stop and think, okay, hey, this worked, this didn't work. How do we change it? How do we grow it? How do we get it better? And the world has changed, right?
mm,
Quite literally, the world has changed beneath our feet. Back in the day, we were super unique with a 2-day training plus 90-day coaching platform. Nobody else was doing that in 2014, 2015, 2016, even 17. And then you started to see some internal programs copy what we had created. But we had no competition at that time. Then, enter COVID and everybody goes to Zoom for everything. Right. And now, all of a sudden there was nothing uniquely special about having an online coaching program, that didn't require people to leave their day. We could just do it for an hour, once a week or once a month or whatever. So
mhm.
uh, we've even gotten to evolve that, which has been interesting. So a lot changes, a lot has evolved. Today, John, I want to give the listeners value today, like massive value. I want them to get to know you and your mind a little bit. So let me preview this, my friends. So here's what I asked John to prepare for today. Um, I asked him to prepare 5 things, and I think he came up with 6 things. We'll see if we can get through them all within the next half an hour or less. But so I want 6 things that we see managers doing that are making their lives harder than they have to be. 5 mistakes managers are making. And here's why I wanted to dive into that. As a third party vendor provider to businesses like yours, a lot of times we find the employees that we coach from other companies are telling us a lot of things that they don't tell their boss. We get into the conversations that nobody else wants to have sometimes. Sometimes we're just coaching people through a curriculum. We're coaching people through a program. We're trying to help them learn sales. We're trying to help them learn leadership. We're trying to help them build better culture. And then also along the way, we get into some one-on-one conversations, or we get into some small group conversations, or we get a text or an email that says, hey, I need to talk. And often we end up providing that value to the participants, the people who are, being paid for by their employers to go through these coaching programs, because there's something about to tip off. Maybe they're about getting ready to leave. Maybe they're upset about something and then they're having a hard time processing it. And they often feel like there's just nowhere to go internally with it. And we get that call. So I asked John to prepare some thoughts about that today. So you ready?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's get into it. What's the first one? By the way, I asked John not to send me these because I want to respond in real time and see what's coming up.
So it'd be interesting to see if we both like if our top 5 would be the same, based on the conversations we have. But you mentioned it puts us in a very unique position because we're kind of like the fly in the wall. We get to hear a lot of things that that the managers don't get to hear, and it could be within like group coaching, and a group of people are talking and maybe complaining, venting about how things are run, or what their manager is doing, what their leader is doing.
Complain about how things are run.
Oh yeah, never, right? Or even on the one-on-one calls, which give us the opportunity to really dive deep and for these folks to share very vulnerably about what's really going on. And we set it up, where there's a level of confidence, of confidentiality, between us and the client, right? I mean, and our clients know that there is this, I don't want to call it, like, I don't know if it's a trifecta or what it is, but like we do talk to the manager, their leader, right? But we don't disclose everything, right? Because some of that stuff is like, there's got to be some sort of level of confidence that they have within us, so that they're able to open up, and we can.
We always tell managers if we feel somebody's being unethical, or like, hey, like this person's leaving tomorrow, and we know that they're one of your star people, and they just failed to tell you, then obviously there's something off in the relationship there. You want to get that fixed.
Yes, 100%, right? So, but I think so. I don't know if there's not really a rank order to this, but one of the first things that came to my mind when you asked me, like, hey, what are the top 5 things? And I think one of the biggest challenges that I come up or that folks come to me with, or one of the root causes, I guess, of a lot of issues or challenges that folks have is that the leaders or the managers are not setting clear expectations. They're kind of just letting their folks go out, fly by the seat of their pants, shoot from the hip, like, hey, here's your job, go forth and conquer. And it kind of feels good on both parties at first, right? Because it's like, because the leader's like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to micromanage them. I'm just going to let them be who they are, let them do their job, and then
micromanager, and everybody loves autonomy.
100%, right?
Yeah.
And so like our coaching clients, they're loving it. It's cool. They're like, cool, I get to kind of figure it out. But then a couple of weeks go by, a few months go by, and then it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if my boss is happy, if I'm even making progress, so there's, and then the leader is frustrated too, because they're like, well, they're not doing what they should be doing. They're not taking initiative. They're not getting the sales. They're not, doing all of the things. And so the conversation becomes like, well, what are the expectations?
Yeah.
And neither party, like whether you're having a manager call or you're having like a normal coaching call, they're like, I don't know. I'm supposed to just go sell. I'm supposed to just run this location.
Yeah.
And it's like, but how?
Yeah. It's wild,
And
man. We recently had a training experience where I was working with a client where we basically are implementing a standardized sales conversation process across the entire organization, across dozens, and I'm talking like 5 dozen plus salespeople. And normally you think there's going to be a lot of resistance around this, right? And we got in there and we did the training, and the participants were walking out so grateful. They're like, we just need to be told what to do, because selling is not the only thing they do. Then they have to go deliver, right, on some of this stuff, because it's agronomy focused. So they got to be agronomists and they got to be salespeople. And they're like, the selling part is the most stressful piece. Just tell me what to do.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and no clear expectations. I mean, it is, and by the way, the chief sinner in this department over here, I know it, because like whenever I think I have been clear, it often has come back to bite me, where it's like, oh, it was clear to me what I was communicating, but it was not clear to the recipient of my message.
Yes.
Yep. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. And I'm not suggesting that people should be micromanaging and dictating every detail of someone's day, but you got to provide structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%, 100%. You gotta provide like and I think this is kind of goes into the second thing that that I deal with a lot, because it's kind of like maybe a 1A 1B kind of deal, or 1 and 1A. It's not giving clear direction. I think they kind of they overlap, they're related, but like a lot of the times what happens is we kick them out, or they kick them out and they're like, hey, go do your job, you should know what to do. And it's like, yeah, I kind of, but I need some sort of guidance. Like you don't have to tell me every step of the way to get from point A to point B. You got to just clearly define what point A and what point B are, a couple like indicators in between there, and then I can figure it out. It's like going on. It's like I like to think about going on vacation, right? If I'm going to go to, let's say, okay, I've got a vacation coming up at the end of summer, going to the Black Hills. We're going to take the horses to the Black Hills, okay? And like my dad and I are going, and I like to like, okay, we're going from Minnesota, we're going to go to the Black Hills. Okay, point A, point B. I also know that dad likes to stop at a couple of Western stores on the way there. Okay, cool. So now I know like our goal is to get to the Black Hills. Also, these are like the little mini targets that dad wants to do or go to or stop at, right? From there, I can choose which road if I'm going to go on the interstate, if I'm going to go take some back roads or whatever, like that's up to me because I'm driving. It's my pickup that we're taking. It's dad's horse trailer, his living quarters, so I get to kind of choose which road, which path to go. But there's certain benchmarks along the way. And I think a lot of the times those benchmarks and that like end goal is not completely provided and it's not clear. And that's one of the big things that, that we teach, at the live event and in our coaching program is clarity, right? It's a leading indicator for a thriving leader.
Yeah.
Right. Is clarity. And we think, like going back to what you, like your little example of like, sometimes we think we're clear, but that's because we've done it before. We've been there, but we miss all the little things, or we forget about all the little things that we had to go through to get there. And then we just assume everybody knows it. Right. So we don't offer it.
Right. Well, and I think, first of all, great analogy with the trip, the horse trip to the Black Hills. I mean, everybody can relate to that, and you can. It's a great visual. This is why you're the senior success coach around here. uh, but I think what happens for a lot of managers along that line is we've probably had some really successful people that we have had under our leadership
Mm.
where I don't really have to tell them what to do, but they're successful anyway, right? And I've been able to give them a lot of autonomy, and they probably have been at the job for a long time, right? They've done this before, they know what to do, and so you don't have to give them as much clear direction. You still got to set expectations. Here's the goal, right? Here's what I need it done by. This is how we act around here. This is not how we act around here. This is our, our pricing structure, et cetera, like things like that, right? You got to set clear expectations. But the direction piece, I think we get a little lazy, don't we? Because when we have good people that work for us, and then we have people that are still good people, but less experienced, we don't have well-honed capabilities, right? That that help us to teach that, to bring that person from the beginning, from the start of the trip to the end of the trip successfully, knowing that there's going to be some weird little back roads that John likes to take and some little country, Western stores that his dad likes to stop at. It's a really good point. Really, really good point. I think a lot of us miss that. I think a lot of us just, we're all, I mean, if I had to put somebody in the training in the senior success coach slot today, right? Because we're growing so fast, I needed another John Anderson. I would really have to go back to the beginning, right? And start thinking about, okay, where was John 8 years ago? And what did we do along the way to build him into the facilitator that he now is, right? Someone who, I hope you're okay with me being vulnerable on your behalf, could hardly hold an audience for a few minutes by himself, can now run an entire 2-day event by himself. Right. And so in the beginning, the coaching and the training, the direction was very, very different, wasn't it?
Yes.
Than where it is now, where it's just like, hey, John, I can't go to this event. I need you to handle it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to say anything else at this point, right? Like it just gets handled. So, and I think everybody in their own organizations, those of you that are listening, like you have that type of experience with different people and different people at different levels of experience. And it all of it, by the way, is a reflection of you as the leader. Mm-hmm. Right. All of it's a reflection of you as a leader. That's why our Thriving Leader program is really, really important. We think it serves a great need in the agriculture industry. We're fitting something else we fit something that's not there, right? Because like you talked about, we talk about leading and lagging indicators. Most people are focused on lagging indicators, and we help our people, thriving leaders, are always focused on leading indicators, like clarity, clear expectations, and clear direction. These are some of the things that we dive into. By the way, you'll probably be listening to this early February, if you're downloading it for the right away. Early February 2025, we have our next public Thriving Leader event. It's coming up here the 18th and 19th of March, and it's going to be in Nashville. So you've got a little bit of time. We are going to have a deadline here coming up the 21st of February, but that gives you a couple weeks to make a decision and get yourself committed and come hang out with John and myself in Nashville for a couple of days. It's going to be a great event. I know we've got 20 some people already registered. I think we'll probably push that to 30 or 40 by then. So
it's good. Yeah, it's going to be good.
All right. What's number 3, John?
All right. So number 3, and this probably goes into maybe, I guess it could be extended to like what you said is sometimes us as leaders or managers, we get kind of lazy with our folks. Right. And so my number 3 is not checking in with their people, like not really checking in. Like, yeah, we say, hey, how's it going? How'd that sales call go? How's the location running? Like all of the things, right? But like not actually sitting down like over lunch or having like a real conversation to get to know them and see how they're really doing, not just professionally, but also personally.
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and I think that leads to, well, when we actually take the time to sit down with our people, it leads to a deeper relationship, right? And for them to open up and trust us, or the leader more, right? Because if we're not taking the time to actually sit down with them, then we're just getting the kind of the oh, everything's going well, everything's good, and it could be on fire behind us, but
Right.
because we don't want to get reprimanded, we don't want to know how like out of control things are. We just say, hey, it's good, and I'll just leave me alone so I can handle this fire over here, But like if we actually sit down and get to know them and develop that relationship, we can then we've got that relationship where we can actually get to get to the meat and potatoes of what's really going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are they really feeling about their job?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Do you think a lot of managers are making that mistake because we're just taking for granted that people want to show up and do the job, and we don't need to get to know them on a personal level, or where do you think that stems from?
I think I think there's part of it is we've been taught where we can't be friends with our folks, or don't get too close to our folks, because if we're too close to them, it's hard to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So I think there's that kind of school of thinking. I also think that a lot of leaders are so busy doing all of the other things
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have time, or they think that they don't have time because their time is more valuable spent putting out all these other fires rather than actually sitting down with their people and having a conversation and talking to them.
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
there's a little bit two schools of thought there.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's a little bit of both, and I think it's more the latter one, right?
Mm,
Or the former. I think it's more the version where we have so much on our plate as leaders that we don't really schedule time to sit down and just talk to people. I'm not saying that you got to sit down and become their best friend. That's a bad idea. But
right.
to sit down and like really find out what's going on and understand what's going on behind the scenes. By the way, this is why number 2, clear direction, is so important, because if we actually given someone structure and helped them know what the pathway to success looks like, well, now like when I'm not on the path to success, it's obvious I should raise my hand and ask for help,
Mm,
right? And now hopefully you've created that structure for me, so now I know what to come and do. Like, hey, this isn't working. I'm not getting the leads. I'm not getting the number of conversations. I'm not getting the number of deals. My people aren't responding the right way. We're behind. We're behind. We're behind. Like there's got to be a point in time when you're like, hey, I need help on this. But what we're finding in most cases is that a lot of people are just sort of hiding, right? Because I don't want to be the employee. I don't want to be the person on your team who's letting you down, because I respect you and I like you, and I know that you're busy and you got your own set of fires to put out. So I don't want to burden you with my fires because I'm falling behind, right? And we end up with all these like just unshared half truths inside of an organization, which leads to eventually a negative viewpoint about somebody who's not performing, because eventually that manager or leader, or you as a manager or leader, are going to get called to accountability by whoever you report to.
mhm, mhm. Well,
Right.
yeah, and I think you're 100% right, because we do end up hiding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to show them like, oh, they got too much going on, or whatever. But then what happens is from my perspective, is when we're hiding, and both folks, right? The leader sometimes hides too, right?
Yep.
Because sometimes they don't even know, they don't know what they should be doing either, or how to give direction or set expectations, right? So they kind of hide too, and they know like, okay, this is burning down, but I'm just going to kind of hide because I don't know how to deal with it either. So you got hiding on both spots, or both fronts. But what happens then, if we're both kind of hiding or neglecting the conversations, then we fall into assumptions,
Yeah.
right? Then we're kind of seeing it from the outside, and we're like, well, I assume that he's just not doing his job. I assume that he's not holding people accountable, or he's not running a tight ship over there. Right. So, and then we have all this assumptions, and then we all know the sayings around assumptions, right? Which I don't know if we should say here or not, but we all know. And so then you've created more turmoil and friction within that relationship.
Yeah. And then you end up when it goes on long enough, you end up in a story.
Right? Yes.
You develop a story about that person, where they're at, why they're not performing, why they're not communicating with you, why they're not setting expectations, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. You just sit and you spin and you stew and you drive down the road in your truck and you're like, you just start telling all these negative stories. In fact, I bet most of you listening to this podcast right now, or you lately have had an argument with your boss or with one of your employees or with one of your coworkers because you're stuck in a story about them, but you had that conversation, that argument completely in your head. And I bet you had all the right lines and you said all the right things and you won that argument, didn't you? Right? Because you're right, or at least you think you are. But guys, what we are is we're stuck in a story. This is another reason everybody needs to come to the Thriving Leader. We teach a framework called the story framework, which helps you understand how your brain gets stuck in these cycles and these stories about people and how to get out of it. Because so many of the stories, one of the things that we say is like, if you're living in a story that you don't like, it's time to change the damn story. That's it. Like, life's too short. Life's too short to just survive feeling negative, feeling bummed out, feeling disgruntled, feeling less than, feeling unappreciated. So take control of the situation and shift the story. Right? Action number 1, just go talk to him. It may feel awkward. It may be weird. You might even get into an argument, but at the end of it, it's going to be over.
Well, and I don't know about you, Mark, but I have found, and I do this myself too. Like, I'm not like all of our content, we also live, right? I think that's why we're so relevant. And that
you try to,
yes. Right. But a lot of it's because we're working on ourselves. We're trying to be better leaders. We're trying to be better husbands and fathers and all the things. Right. So like all the content is always like a breathing thing that we are working on ourselves too. And I find myself in a story sometimes, and I find a lot of our clients in stories. But what's really interesting, I think is sometimes, or maybe more often than, like, when we're in a story, it's our story, and we almost like, it's kind of like our, how do I say this? It's like our baby. Like, we want to keep that story, right? So it's like, even if the story isn't true, we want that story because it's our story, and we've spent so much time justifying that story.
Yep.
And like for instance, if we create a story about our manager or like or an employee, right? And we've got this story, and it's we own it, and it's what we think is going on, that we actually look for evidence to continue to prove it true.
Yeah.
Right. And we will ignore evidence that goes against the story. Right? Because you're like, oh, that's just an anomaly, it's just a coincidence, that's not true. But look at all the other things that support my story. And then we'll hang on to that story like with a death grip.
Yep.
To the point where it actually starts hurting us. But because we've held on to it so long, it's like, I'm not going to change it.
Yep.
Because it's my story, and I know how to live within this story. And I think that's part of, like, what we do, like going through the story framework, is giving people, one, to reflect on, hey, is that story actually serving you in a positive way? But then also giving people permission to maybe challenge that story a little bit. Like, is it really true?
Is it? Yeah.
Is it? And most of the time you're like, yes, of course it's true, because I got all this evidence, but it's also like, I haven't looked at the other side,
Right.
But then all of a sudden you start examining that side, and you're like, oh, maybe it isn't true. And I think that, and going back to the original point that we were making, is not checking in with folks. Sometimes sitting down with our people to really get to know them, to really understand what's going on, it actually can challenge our story. It can be like, oh, I didn't know this was actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
So now that story that I had about you isn't completely true.
Right.
Maybe it's 50% true, but now we got some other details that can enlighten us and be like, okay, yeah, maybe something else is going on. Now that I got the full story, now I can help you. I can maybe set some other expectations. Maybe I can give you some direction that you needed that you weren't getting before.
Yeah.
But I
So
wouldn't
good.
have had that if I didn't meet with you.
So good. And I think for people to have kind of a structured conversation, just templated, something that has some bullet points like this. Like you could literally just take everything that we've talked about in here today, John, and turn this into a framework to guide the conversations that you're having with your people. By the way, if you don't have people, if you're listening to this, you're not in a leadership position where people report to you, then take this. You can apply the same conversation with your spouse, with your husband, with your wife, with your kids, et cetera, et cetera. Because it's home is just it's another team that you're on, right? Whether it's just the one or two of you, or you and like Christine and I have 6 kids. Like there's a lot of expectations that we literally, my wife and I had a meeting this morning about setting expectations for the people living inside the house. We got 6 of them rotating through here, 9 to 23 years old. There's a lot of expectations to set for different reasons. So anyway, but you can have this conversation and just say, okay, so what are the clear expectations? And let's sit down and say, okay, and you need to communicate your expectations, right? What are their expectations, right? And have a conversation around that and let that be a dialogue. And then and then review it. Are we clear on what the expectations are? Great. If we are, if not, then go back and continue to talk about them. Okay, clear direction. How do we get it done? How are we going to get there? Okay, what are the expectations for that? And then finally, like setting, are we really setting time to check in on this thing? Are there any stories? You might be saying, hey, here's the expectations. Here's how you're going to get there. What do you see, John, that could maybe get in the way of that happening, or you be able to accomplish it? Right? Because the, the story might be a self-limiting belief, right? Like they don't believe in their ability to go do it. And now you're like, oh, I mean, we could go, we don't have time to go any further than this today. So like this is gonna be a 2-parter. We go super deep into self-limiting beliefs and how to work through those with your people as well. But I think this is a cool framework. What are the expectations? How are we going to get there? Great. What are the potential roadblocks or things that might get in the way? Where do you see yourself? What help do you need? Right. And by the way, when somebody responds to you saying, "Oh, I'm good. I don't really need any help. I'm fine." Right. I don't know what it is, but we just have this human nature to protect ourselves. And like, we don't want to not have the answer. Like, stop. When you hear that, stop. Say, no, I want at least one thing. Give me at least one thing that you need help with. Give me at least one thing that you don't feel good about going about, or don't feel certain in as you go to tackle this. And so if you ask somebody, where do you feel inadequate, or where do you feel like you might need help? Okay, nobody wants to have help. Just keep that in mind. Nobody wants to need help. We all want to be able to get the job done on our own. We all want to be the hero of the story. So ask a better question, right? And the question has got to be, hey, I want 2 things that you're going to need help with on this project. I need it by the end of the day. Text me before 5:00 what those 2 things are. Be very clear and direct with the ask, because otherwise people are like, well, I'll figure it out, right? I can Google it, I can YouTube it. I'll figure it out, right? I'll ask somebody, because they don't want to burden you, but they don't want to be wrong at the same time. So okay, John, I'm going to give you a second here for some final thoughts on this. This is going to be a 2-parter, because I know you brought 6 things. We got through 3 of them. We're already 40 minutes into it. We're not going to get any further. So, what final thoughts that you have, and then I'll wrap it up.
Final thoughts. I really like what you said. Is even if you're listening to this and you don't have a team, maybe you've got a family at home, or maybe you're just a single, living your life or whatever. There's still a lot of value in here, and so what I was thinking about, like when talking about that, is is oftentimes we are coaching, and I guess it doesn't have to be younger folks, but maybe folks that don't have a team, and they're like, well, my leader doesn't do this, or my leader doesn't give me direction, doesn't set expectations. I need this, I need that. You don't always have to wait for the leader. Like if you're
Yeah,
not getting this stuff,
come on.
like, go seek it, right? Like you don't have to wait for your manager, your leader to set up a meeting to go over expectations or directions or goals or outcomes or whatever. Like set it up yourself. Say, hey,
Sure.
leader, like we need 30 minutes and I want to go over your expectations, my expectations, directions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want to get to know you a little bit more, right? So it's like that. And I tell you what, like leaders love that
They do.
because oftentimes like they're not thinking about that. They got other things that they're trying to do. And sometimes we forget about having that conversation with that person because it's like, oh, they haven't come to me for anything, so they must be doing well. Right. But then in fact, like that person probably is like burning, it's like burnt out, drowning. So if you feel that, you be the leader, because I do believe that like just because you don't have maybe a position, like quote unquote a title or position, doesn't mean that you can't not lead.
Mm-hmm.
um
Exactly. It's
so we gotta learn
such a
to
good
lead
point,
well.
John. It's such a good point because so many people are sitting back there feeling like a victim because they're not getting the attention that they want or the attention they think they deserve. Hey, you've got the framework right now. This is a 3-step framework. Set the meeting with your boss. Go have this conversation. If he doesn't respond right away, can't get you in, ask until he does. That's it. Like, there's no other excuse. Don't sit there and start scrolling agcareers.com just because nobody set a meeting to set expectations. Go get them. Go find them. Go make them. Be the entrepreneur, right, within your organization and find a way to be that next best version of yourself. So, guys, these are some of the things that we talk about at the Thriving Leader program. We go deep and deep and deep on these things and give you lots and lots of, well, I don't want to overwhelm you. We give you the most essential frameworks that you need to be able to operate from a thriving leader level capacity. So, if that is something that's interesting for you, or you want to get that for your team, or you're like, hey, I want to go to this, all you got to do, head over to themomentumcompany.com. Okay, themomentumcompany.com, or you can shoot me an email, mark@themomentumcompany.com. We'll get a conversation on the calendar. Head over to the website. You can hit book now, schedule an appointment. We'll get on there and get you registered. We've got 2 weeks to get yourself registered here. February 21st is going to be the deadline for our March 18th and 19th event in Nashville. You guys need to be there. John and I, Christine, the team, Ani, we're all going to be there hanging out, helping you guys cross the barrier from surviving to thriving. We say survival is dead. It's our time to thrive. That means survival is no longer an option. It's not an option to just get by during the workday. You only get to live once. Why would we allow ourselves to survive any more than we have to? Themomentumcompany.com. We hope to see you guys in Nashville. Until next time, thanks for being here. John, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.